Hello everybody, James here. Storytime with Dutch Mantell, episode 67. For goodness me, we're ploughing through these episodes, aren't we, Dutch? And there you go, Dutch has thrown up gang signs as I say the word 67 as well. But for now, I will be doing a few plugs first before we get into the meat of it. We have 2 episodes a week, if you didn't know that already. We're on Fridays and Tuesdays, 8 a.m. Eastern. Those shows are released. We have 5 stars on iTunes, and you know we want your 5 stars off iTunes, quite frankly. That's what we're after. That damn camera started moving again, Dutch. Straight into the intro this time. It usually takes like half an hour. There we go. Now, yeah, it's kicked off. Oh, by the way.
Hey, you sent me how to fix it. Guess what? It's not fixed.
I know. We'll work it out someday. Let me get through the rest of the plugs, by the way.
Ask the fans, does this camera movement bother them?
Does this camera movement bother you? Please put it in the comments and we'll see.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Right, we've got 4 books between us. I've got 2. We'll do mine first. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the People's Champion, What I Wrote, and Owen Hart, King of Pranks, What I Wrote. The 2 greatest biographies ever written on these 2 gentlemen. And Dutch has 2 books as well. The World According to Dutch, over his left shoulder, and also Tales from a Dirt Road, over his left shoulder. 2 fine autobiographies, some of the best stories you'll ever hear on pro wrestling. If you want them unsigned, you can go to Amazon. That's all 4. And you can't buy my signed at the moment, but if you want Dutch's books signed, you go to Dirty Dutch Mantell with 2 L's at gmail.com and make your request there. And one more thing, Franchise University with Shane Douglas also comes out every Tuesday, very early in the morning, I think, Eastern Time, and can also be found on Shane Douglas official YouTube channel. Oh, also, Dutch, because you asked me, and I meant to tell you this before the podcast, but we've also got at least approved, and then I've not filled out all the stuff to get more t-shirts up, but we're on Pro Wrestling Tees now.
Oh, are we?
We are.
Fans, check that out.
Oh, not yet though.
Not yet. Don't check it out yet. That's what according to James. So, hey, let me ask you about Shane. Shane's a podcast. What's the name of it?
Franchise University, which you have claimed steps on the toes of your intellectual property.
Of course, because I have the University of Dutch. But let me ask you something. I actually offer a diploma from the University of Dutch that you can write to me, and I will have your name transcribed on a beautiful diploma that comes ready to hang with the big seal of approval, signed by 2 great men in the educational business, Dirty Dutch Mantell, which is me, and a gentleman I met once, Zeb Coulter. He signs it too. So, does he have one of those?
No. Do you sign it in quill and ink? So I think that kind of thing needs like a bit more.
I do sign it in quill and ink, and I sit down. And I put the old Benjamin Franklin outfit on, and that's the way I sign it, because that's the only way you can sign it. So if you have wrestling knowledge, and somebody says, "How do you know so much?" and you said, "I'm a graduate," or the person who has my diploma can say, "I'm a graduate of the University of Dutch." Are you? Of course, they won't be. So therefore, you earn the high ground right then. It is a nice looking diploma, comes ready to hang in a nice diploma holder. And if you're interested in it, just email me, Dirty Dutch Mantell, with how many L's, James?
7, 8, 9. I can't remember.
With two L's at gmail.com, and I'll get back to you.
We on this podcast are going to be talking, to be honest, we're going to be talking mostly news, but today's podcast main event is going to be talking weirdly about other wrestling podcasts. Now, after in fact, it was during Tuesday's show, Dutch, you asked me, could we do some sort of like fan survey from our subscribers and see what podcasts they listen to, wrestling podcasts they listen to, what wrestling podcasts they don't like, and give us a reason for each. Now, I was expecting, I don't know, a few dozen replies. At last count, because I got quite a few emails as well, we got over 430 responses, which is almost mind-blowing how many responses we got. So we've collated all that information, and we will be delving into that a little later on in the show. But the first thing, first order of business is bring the microphone closer to you. I mean, normally I tell
fans, you see how he is? He is just bossy.
Normally I pause the recording and say that, but I thought, no, let's just do it this way.
All right, I'm going to turn it just a little bit like that. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just wonderfully.
Okay.
And the first thing...
that's the way he treats me all the time. And I'm like an employee. Hey, do this, do that. Hurry up.
I am a slave driver. Let's not...
You are.
Yeah.
So...
But
you're interesting, and you know how to do a podcast, and I don't.
Well...
I'm just good for content. Setting it up, forget that. I can't do it.
No, I mean, as evidenced by the camera constantly twitching as well. But in fairness, you did download the software for it to fix it, and you clicked on everything and just said, will not upload on your computer. So I'm afraid for the time being, we're stuck with a slightly moving camera. But let us know in the comments how much it bothers you.
Yeah, let us know. And I won't move that much, so the camera shouldn't move.
We will.
Seriously, I'm going to sit like this, like a statue, during the whole podcast. I'm not going to move. I'm going to sit here like this.
So I'm waiting in complete silence now. I'm going to see how long we can leave it.
Okay, go ahead. I'm going to sit just like this. I'm going to see how long I can sit like this.
Okay.
But continue.
Okay.
I can talk, and I can move my head. It hadn't moved, see?
Right. We will. We'll see. We'll see. First order of business: the death of Brett Sawyer, is the younger brother of Buzz Sawyer, wasn't he? He was the younger brother. So memories of Brett.
Younger brother. What now? Did I know him?
Memories of Brett.
Well, he was a good kid. Of course, Buzz started first, and he kind of paved the way for Brett. Brett came along later, and they were total opposites. I mean, Buzz is screaming and hollering in the back, and I always thought he had to hit about 10 lines of cocaine before I would meet him, because he was all so hyper all the time. And Brett would walk in, and he was so laid back. And I was thinking, how in the hell? Of course, I didn't say this to them, but they were like polar opposites. I mean, they couldn't be brothers. And of course, Brett got a lot of his introduction into business through Buzz. But he was a good guy, decent, not great, but a decent hand in the ring. And you could have a good match with him. I mean, he would listen, and he wasn't overbearing, nothing like his brother. So just maybe the same genes in both of them. And I guess same mother and father. They didn't even really look like each other that much. Maybe a little bit.
It's funny because I'm even looking at Brett Sawyer now, because Brett Sawyer had hair. Like, he had a good head of hair as well. Whereas Buzz was bald by the time he was like 12, it seemed. Do you know, they really were incredibly disparate people. I think a lot of people that I've read have said somewhat of an underappreciated hand, nowhere near as crazy as his brother, as you say, and maybe for the 80s and 90s, a bit undersized for the sort of muscle-bound freak era.
Well, he would fit in today. He probably weighed maybe 200, maybe a little more. And I can sympathize with him there, because I was never more my working weight when I could really go. I was only like 210, 215. But when you're in the land of giants, they look at you like, hell, you slap the Pope or something. Because when you walk around WCW locker room, the average size back for some of those guys was like 6'4", 6'5", 250, 260. So when you walking in, I don't even think I was even 6 foot, and I weighed like 215. They look at me like, hell, what's this midget doing back here? see, in ordinary life, I'd be a pretty good sized guy, but in the wrestling world, and of course, Vince McMahon, the WWF, back in the WWF, when it existed, which it doesn't anymore. We'll talk about that in a minute. I mean, if you were under 6'4", don't even bother contacting Vince, because he's going to reject you on size alone, because he liked those big monster guys, even though they're slow and they're plodding and they don't do a lot of, they can't do anything much except punch and kick and stomp around. And I always found it hard to tell a story with big guys, because they wanted their size to do everything for them, which it won't do. And if you think you're going to draw a lot of money with them, I don't think you will. You got to have that baby face, that younger baby face. He's got to be a pretty good sized guy too to match up with them. But those big guys, I never really believed in them. I mean, just getting in by size alone.
We will move on. You alluded to it just before. WWE, the end of an era. UFC and WWE merge into a single company, TKO. The temporary name that somehow stuck. I'm sure that was the temporary name that we were going to call it. Now it's just TKO for good now. This makes it the first time
it could be Tony Khan organization.
I was thinking
TKO.
Enterprises. I just made up a word then. Where was I? So this is going to be the first time in 70 years McMahon has not had majority ownership of the WWE in its previous incarnations, WWF, WWF, Capital Sports, etc. Although Vince will retain a 16% stake in TKO. Now WWE stockholders will have their stock transferred to TKO stock. UFC was never floated on the stock exchange, so there's no UFC stock sort of transfer. Cross-marketing, have cities pay for getting a WWE and UFC combined sort of weekend of events. Older UFC fighters may be migrating over to WWE and avoiding pay-per-view clashes on the same day have been some of the benefits touted with this new merger, as well as consolidating, backroom employees and that kind of thing to make it a more streamlined affair. So it really is the end of an era in this sense.
Well, it is. Okay, so say they go to Philadelphia with a wrestling pay-per-view on Saturday night and a UFC pay-per-view on a Sunday night, and they will use that same broadcast off Raw. And I guess, what TV does the MMA UFC have?
I think they're on ESPN now. They do their pay-per-view through ESPN as well, which is, I believe, at one point really complicated because you had to get the ESPN app and then get the pay-per-view through that.
Ooh.
So who knows, maybe an ESPN deal in the future. But they've explicitly said because of the TV rights cycles that WWE and UFC's rights cycles coincide, they don't coincide. They're on different years, that they're not going to try and sell WWE and UFC pay-per-view rights as like one giant, sorry, not pay-per-view, broadcast rights as one giant package. That's one thing they apparently won't do. So they say.
Well, I'm going to say that that's an expensive weekend if you are a UFC fan, an MMA fan, and a wrestling fan. I think you got to choose one or the other. I don't know how much that would affect either one of them, but I mean, they're stacking a lot on one weekend in a certain town. But it is a good idea. I mean, if you piggyback them, one on Saturday night, one on Sunday night, which is not a bad idea. But I think the WWE situation right now, I think it's better than the UFC, the UFC situation.
How so?
Well, because they can pick and choose their own stories. The MMA, they actually have to have a guy that's a winner and has a kind of a flow to him, a mouth to him, to get accepted. And I'm very curious to see how this is going to turn out. The thing about UFC that bothers me is when you have a winner, you just have a winner. One guy just beats the crap out of the other guy, and they doing the interview. And I'd like to see that guy come off the deck and just kick the shit out of the guy right in the face. Bam. Now you got something. He comes from the back, big roundhouse kick, pow, right in the mouth. The mic goes flying, the announcer runs, and then they have to pull him off. Now you got something. And they haven't done that, I don't think, in UFC.
No, the closest thing they did, okay, there was something in Bellator with Mayhem Miller or something, or Strikeforce, that was years ago. But I think that's probably why they get Daniel Cormier and Michael Bisping to do the interviews, because they're massive, scary dudes anyway, who are only a couple of years out of retirement, so they could look after themselves. But for the most part, I think the most interesting thing that's happened was Israel Adesanya had in-ring confrontation with that South African guy, Duplessis, I can't remember his name. But that's all they are. They'll very, very occasionally have like the number one contender who's just won a match, and then they'll have the champion in, and they'll have like a mini face-off. And I think a few years ago, Brock Lesnar faced off Daniel Cormier, in fact, which was actually, we believe, not in the plans. Brock just got up and just went in the cage and just did it. So that's probably the nearest in years that anything spontaneous has happened in that sense. But that never ended up as in a fight anyway.
What do you think is more popular, UFC or boxing?
I don't know which one generates more yearly. Probably boxing still, because it's the only sport that can get over 1 million buys every year with more than one person. Like if it's Canelo or the right fight with Tyson Fury, maybe. I don't know.
They get more than 1 million buys on pay-per-view?
Some boxing fights still do, yeah. UFC's very, very rarely does. And now because they're with ESPN, it's all kept in-house, so we don't actually know what the buys are at all. All we've got to go on is how many Google searches they've done in the previous week to see how much interest.
And that's the problem, I think. When they pay these guys, we're used to seeing big amounts that he's going to make this and this and this and this. But the other fighters don't make hardly nothing.
Nope.
According to what they put into it. Say they make 20 grand, but they've trained 6 months for it. How are they going to pay their crew? Who pays them?
The crew take a percentage off the top as well. So, the majority. I mean, that's why the Kung Lee lawsuit's out there at the moment, because that lawsuit and another lawsuit that covers a different time frame alleges that UFC pays their fighters so much less than other sports like NFL and stuff. That's why the
Logan brothers, they want to do these exhibitions. That's why guys do them. They pay more for an exhibition. I've read. I'm not sure on this. They pay more for an exhibition than they will for a big fight where they're the main event.
Yeah, they will.
Crazy, huh?
Yeah.
Those Logan boys are on to something. Now they're doing the influencers. They're doing them against each other. And if they got big followings on social media, people will tune in and watch it.
They've already pretty much milked. They've already milked that one dry, though. I mean, there was the Tyson return that did fairly big business, which was also an exhibition fight. That might have been Roy Jones Jr. off the top of my head. And then they did a couple of influencer fights with the Paul brothers, did quite well, and then not really much else after that as far as like huge interest. I think the Nate Diaz.
I think you need to do one with Meltzer.
Why?
No, because I think people would watch it. But you'd get out here, but you tell Meltzer, hey, we're going to work this. Let's pick the third, and I'll just
jump.
I'll do my glove like this, and you just nail me right here, and I'll go down, and then double cross him and kick him in the balls, and then when he goes down, you punch him again.
On pay-per-view, though.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
we got to get our money in.
With that being said, do you think, because there's already been corporate bloodletting happening with the merger, do you see a raft of WWE on-screen talent going as well in the near future?
Not really.
No?
No, they need these guys. because you got the same talent 52 weeks a year. So just lay them off and bring some new ones in. And they're big enough where they can actually eat the salary for a while anyway. Because they're still selling the guys merchandise and they have him available to do all these other things. So say a guy's making $400,000, or so give him 3 months off and he can go and train and do this other stuff. But I don't see letting a lot of them go. I don't see that.
We will move on. And Bryan, for God's sake, I keep calling him Daniel Bryan. WWE has conditioned me to call him that for over a dozen years. Bryan Danielson says he's going to wind up his career in 1 year. Now, initially cutting a promo on AEW Collision, making this public, Bryan Danielson later clarified his stance to ESPN. I don't think I'll ever reach a point where I declare I'm absolutely done, Danielson said. I want the ability to show up when I want to show up. Terry Funk is someone I always admired. He retired 1,000,000 times, but he loved it so much he couldn't help but keep doing it, and he did it when he wanted. For me, it might be a couple of times a year, or it might be years between matches.
I want to say one thing right now that I think the fans will kind of agree with me on. You don't quit wrestling. You just don't quit it. I mean, Terry Funk, he was like what's the band who went on that retirement tour?
Oh, you always say the Eagles. Yeah.
Eagles, yeah. And they retired for 20 years. Terry Funk was like the same thing.
Hey, the Eagles have been dropping like flies and they're still doing retirement tours and still going out there.
See? So they're not quitting. They're continuing to go. But you don't really quit wrestling. Wrestling can quit you. But you can't quit wrestling because somebody calls you, I quit. I mean, not really me, but say I'm a big star, huge star. And somebody calls me up, hey, I got this show I'm doing some so-and-so and so-and-so, and could I interest you in coming in for me and having a match? I said, well, what is it paying? And then he'll throw a number out. Then if I'm interested, I throw a bigger number out, much more than what I really wanted. And then we can dicker from there. But if he throws a figure out, okay, $5,000. Okay, and first class ticket, hotel, food, throw all that in there. And he says, yeah, I'll do it. Well, yeah, I'll come out of retirement for that. And then I go in there and have a match. And even the guys who see Funk, I saw him in his later stages. You could tell he was done, really, because he moved slow. And it's kind of hard to watch some of these guys that you really cherished and loved and supported. When they get older, yeah, they can still go, but at a much reduced pace. And it's kind of sad to watch that. So, and then he can say, well, I'm retired now. I'm not going to do any more till the next call comes in. And then he comes out of retirement again. So I don't think you really retire from the wrestling business. The wrestling business retires from you. And you deal with that. I think Lawler, he's 73. He had a match last year when he was 72. And he was always pretty agile, pretty fluid in the ring. And now you watch him, it's a struggle. Even before he had the stroke. And it's even lucky that we even still have him around, because what he had was a serious, serious stroke. And if he had not gotten medical attention as quickly as he did, I think he may not be with us today, or he could be with us and not even being able to talk. So, and even seeing him on Raw a couple of weeks ago, we talked about this, I think last week, you could tell that he kept doing this, like he wanted to say something, but they didn't give him the mic, and I'm glad they didn't. But it was good to see him. He looked pretty good. So I hope he's fine. But anyway, back to the original question. I didn't forget it, James.
No, it's fine.
About what do you call him, Daniel Bryan? What's his name,
Bryan Danielson? I know. I
still call him Bryan Daniels too. I just do that. But and if he retires, great. And if he wants to go home for, I don't know, from AEW, if he wants to go home for 9 months and not wrestle, but I don't think he's going to do that. I think what he will do, he will, because Tony Khan has talked about this, that if it comes to the point where he's just burnt out on it, he was going to hand it to Bryan and saying, you do this for a while. And of course, Bryan would take it and he would restaff everything and move things around to where he's comfortable doing it and see what they can do.
I'll give you one more portion of the quote from that. Is Bryan Danielson, I said it right that time, in my mind it's around August of next year. My daughter will say, Daddy, are you going to be done wrestling when I turn 7? And I'll respond, well, not exactly when you turn 7, but I'll be on the home stretch. I didn't get a chance to do All In this year. I would like that chance next year. We have a show, Wrestle Dream, this October 1st in Seattle, where I'm wrestling Zack Sabre Jr. If we have another year in Seattle, maybe it will be then. My daughter turns 7 in May, so it's a good time to close down the shop. So he's
Why the emphasis on Seattle? Does he live in Seattle?
Yeah. Or Washington, yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's tough because obviously a lot of wrestlers have got families and they're on the road. And, I mean, it's a different kettle of fish now than it was back in your day. But, so, you can understand the idea of...
Okay, they're on the road. Let me just kind of... They're not on the road like we were on the road. We were on the road 7 days a week. And a lot of time we weren't gone for the whole week. But, you're working every day. We beat that road up and the rings beat us up. I mean, some of those guys, and you read to me not too long ago, how many matches, say, Seth Rollins has had in WWE? And he hasn't had many.
Do you know who it was? It was Tyrus. And I think he had like 10 in a year. Edge, in fact, he probably only had 10 in 2 years or something like that.
Well, you're paid there for just your image and your interview skills because they can show you on TV. It's like you're there. But a guy who got over like the son of a gun and never worked on TV much and never really, he just made the big shows really, was Hulk Hogan. And you never saw him wrestle on TV because if you wanted to see Hulk wrestle, you had to actually buy a ticket and go to Madison Square Garden and go to Boston and go to Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Cleveland and Detroit and all the big towns. He wouldn't make the smaller towns like Utica. He won't make that. He just makes the big ones, which is why he lasted as long as he had. And I have read, how many operations you think Hulk has had?
He's probably in the dozens now. Didn't he have like 7 or 8 just on his back at one point?
Yeah, I think I read like close to 20. I don't know if that's true or not, but...
Maybe he wrote a song about it, and we could like find from the song that's where the true answer lies.
Yeah. We need to come up with an operation song. Knock me out so I don't feel anything.
Ooh, my back is giving me grief.
Oh,
just because we're on the retirement thing, I can think of one wrestler. There's probably more, but see if you can think of one wrestler who was on or near the top of the game and then said, I'm retiring at this age, and then stayed retired and never wrestled again.
I can't.
I've got one I thought of. Nikita Koloff. I'm just looking at his matches now.
Yeah, but he had a vision from God to quit wrestling, which is another subject we need to talk about one day.
What's that?
Is wrestlers going into the revival business?
Oh, we've covered that one. We had loads.
I love that.
Should we could do an entire episode one day, but we came up with a good one with Tully and Buddy Landell and Jake, of course, and Ted DiBiase, and there's plenty of them. Nikita, but we'll leave that there. We'll move on. Matt Riddle airport incident, which this might transition into a Norway story. You never know. Matt Riddle posted and then quickly deleted the following on Instagram. Nothing like being sexually assaulted by an officer and harassed at the JFK airport. No means no, and just because I'm nice doesn't mean yes, asshole. Don't know their... Okay, I spelled there wrong. I really hate that. Their Twitter or Instagram handles, but I took pictures. Normally I'm like whatever, but today was really weird and uncomfortable, and they made a point to make me feel small and useless. Definitely one of the most uncomfortable travel days I've ever had. Thanks, NYC, you're so progressive and accepting. Then he posted afterwards a selfie with the caption, finally leaving JFK, now I never want to come back here again. What's going on there?
I don't know. I was going to ask you. What do you mean sexually assaulted? And I've never told anybody this, but I kind of like going through that stuff. Guys all hands on, hey, watch it, But I just said that just out of respect, because. But I don't know, what could they have assaulted him on? They tapped his little testicles maybe a little bit, or?
Maybe.
I don't get it. And then when he came out, they reported, and then he talked to the police, and he says, he didn't say anything else. He was actually apologetic, and I don't know what that's about. I really don't. I've never heard that before in my life.
Have you ever had well, maybe not the rubber glove treatment, but have you ever had, overzealous airport security take the liberty with you? I mean, you've done enough flying. You must have run into the odd uncomfortable situation.
Oh, yeah. Well, I got into it with one of those. He examines you and taps all around. But he was a damn asshole, And I said, hey, brother. Mm-hmm. I said, watching on the jewels down there a little bit, and it pissed him off. I may have said a few more things. I said, unless you like doing that kind of stuff, that maybe. And then he told me to go stay off to the side and do this and do that. And I mean, we didn't really, I made him mad. He made me mad. I mean, I went through without too much of a delay. But those guys get a little bit overzealous, a little bit. But I don't know if it would constitute to a degree of sexual assault. I don't get that. I mean, how can you sexually assault somebody out in the open unless they took them in a room?
Maybe they did. Or they take you behind like a little curtain, like a little pull-out sort of curtain thing.
They did take me in. This is where I learned about this, how much money, cash money, you can come through with. You know how much you can come through with?
Go on.
Legally.
Depends on the country. I don't know, 10 grand.
10 grand.
Is it actually the right answer?
Yes, that is the right answer.
Uh-huh.
So I was leaving Puerto Rico one time, and I had a bunch of cash on me. And I had heard the story, don't go through with more than 10 grand. So I carefully counted out what I had, and it was $9,900. I know exactly what it was, or maybe a little more. So it was going through my bag, the little bastages. And, they can tell when money is in there. They can see it. They said, what's that? I said, I don't know what's it look like. He said, money. I said, well, that's what it is then. I said, you're pretty well trained. So I got a little smart ass with them, and I'm kidding them, but they take it the wrong way. And they said, sir, would you mind accompanying us to another location? I said, where are we going? He said, no, we're just going to go in this room right here and talk. And I go in there, and they didn't touch anything. I had to touch everything. And they said, they opened my bag up, and they said, could you remove that? So I removed it, took it out. And they said, how much is that? And I said, well, it's $9,900. And I knew if it was over 10, they could take it. Just take it. Legally.
Could they take the entire 10,000 plus, or do they just take anything above 10,000?
No, they take it all.
Really?
They will take it all. So I counted out. It was $100 bills. And of course, I'd like 3 or 4 weeks, I'd saved up. I didn't want to send it. And I counted $9,900. And they says, do you mind counting it again? I went, well, but damn, I just counted it. What do you want me to do? And I had to count it out again. And they let me go, but they thought they could just take that money. Now, I read about a guy going down the road one day, and they stopped, the state police stopped this guy, and he had like 60 grand, and they took it all. Because he was going to Vegas or somewhere to gamble, and they took all his money. Now, he got it back, but he got it back about a year later. Because I'm not saying they can keep it. You can file to get it back. But what do attorney fees cost to file to get that back? There's no telling. So, but that's some of the problems I've gone through at the airport. Not a lot. It's usually pretty nice, but sometimes, I guess those people get a little bit wary or tired of people asking stupid questions and having. See, when I say something to somebody, sometimes I'm kidding, but they don't have the same humor system I do, and they think I'm being a smartass.
No. Airport security, for the most part, they probably have on the CV, do you have a sense of humor? And if you tick yes, they will not hire you. It's one of the few jobs that I immediately distrust you.
Where did you hear that?
I think I might have made that up. But
that does sound good.
Yeah, but do you know what it is, though? There's like certain jobs, right, that if you take them, I immediately hate you. And one of them is airport security, the people because a lot of them just love to make your life more miserable. Because, hey, they don't have anywhere else to go, and they get paid the same whether they're fingering your bum hole for made-up cocaine or not. Or parking, not parking attendants, but the ones who ticket you, like for parking fines, stuff like that. Because you know you're going to be hated, yet you still took the job. There's something off about that.
Okay, how would you like to know that you get up in the morning and you got to go to the airport and you're the one that checks people out and charges them on their card? I'd hate that.
Yeah.
I would hate that. Are you working on like a toll road? People come by and just throw money in the deal or whatever, and don't even acknowledge you. I did read one time that people who do that, they have a lot of depression problems because people ride by and don't even acknowledge that they're there. And after a while, I guess it takes its toll on them. It takes their toll on them on a toll road. See?
And they're looking for revenge.
That's pretty good, huh?
Yeah. Oh, I'll say this very quickly. We've got a toll road about 20 miles away from where I live, and I can't even remember where it is. It's like I won't even bother trying to figure out where it is. The toll, and I'll do this in cents for you. The toll is about 30 cents. But the thing is, I think it's some farmer who allowed a road to be built, but he still owned the land. So they just get some. But the thing is, they have people going in all day, every day. And it's just like a little 30 cents here, 30 cents, it's like 20 pence, something like that. And they must just be laughing their heads off that all they have to do is pay some minimum wage just to sit there, let them go through the thing, and then they keep everything else for themselves.
The farmer keeps it?
Let's assume it's a farmer. I think it's private, yeah. So it is technically a private road that the public uses constantly. It's a really weird situation.
It is. I never heard that before.
We're going to move on. I'll tell you the Norway story another time. LA Knight slaps down Kevin Nash on last week's SmackDown. So this is a bit old, but it's going to play into something else. He said on SmackDown during in-ring segment, if I was a complete moron, I'd say, look at the adjective, play. But I'm not, so I'll say, look at the verb. So you know what that reference is, don't you?
No, not really. I was going to ask you. What's that reference?
Kevin Nash, very famously, when he was going into WCW to form the NWO, he says, look at the adjective, play. Because the WCW slogan was where the big boys play. But the thing is, play is a verb, not an adjective. So Kevin Nash had some sort of English literature blunder there on that, and somehow that's become a meme almost 30 years later.
Still don't get it.
That's fine. We'll move on. Kevin Nash also said, and I'm not sure if he's trying to book his own angle or if he's just trying to do what we do and just amuse ourselves on a podcast and also try and get the odd headline and try and get extra views, is that he seems, by giving CM Punk grief, this is Kevin Nash talking about, that he's comparing levels of toxicity of CM Punk to the Ultimate Warrior. So the quote is, he's already put himself on the mantle right next to the Ultimate Warrior. Nash said, "You're sucker punching Luke Perry's son." But, I don't know, toxic-wise, CM Punk or Ultimate Warrior for you?
Ultimate Warrior. I mean, nobody... I mean, I always, and I've made this plain, I always stayed in my lane. And I knew Warrior when he first started. He was horrible. And I can proudly say today, he never improved. I mean, he's doing the same stuff he did in his first match because he never attempted to learn anything else. And you know why he never attempted to learn? I don't think Vince wanted him to learn. I think Vince wanted him exactly like he was, just all pumped up and going in there and grabbing the ropes and shaking it and running around like a cartoon figure, which is what he was. But he was horrible then when he started. He's horrible now. And
he's dead
he's
now.
The most before he died or before he stopped wrestling, he was horrible. He never improved at all. And he was toxic, because he'd go in the dressing room and I guess he dressed by himself. He had no friends. He had nobody traveling with him, anything. And he would talk to Vince and some of the agents and the referee, and that's it. I don't know who else says there was really Ultimate Warrior's friend, because when I was around him, he didn't have any. Now, Sting, they broke in together, but I don't think they were that close, because when they went to Mid-South and they was both there at the same time, when they left, I think Sting went to WCW and I think Warrior went to Dallas to World Class, and that's where they split. So, and then of course Vince heard about him and he took Ultimate Warrior. He didn't take Sting. And he didn't take Sting because the Turner Group in those days, they wanted Sting and they paid him to stay. And those guys are probably two of the luckiest guys with I'll say Warrior, with the least bit of talent available. And they made millions. Now, Sting was about 10 times better than Warrior, but Sting only did a certain moveset anyway. Sting relied on just the gimmick Sting and beating his chest and to get over. And he did get over, and Warrior got over. So, but they were lucky in a way that they came along at just the right time.
Specifically speaking, so you said toxic, right? So we've milked it for all it's worth, the CM Punk story. We've got lots of views out of it as well, in fact. But, that's what we're doing, obviously. And there's, I don't know, one person calls someone toxic from their point of view. What is toxic? That's one thing we can argue about, I'm sure, or agree on. But you said with Ultimate Warrior, and in WWF in 1996, now you were there for his entire run, 5 fabulous months with the Ultimate Warrior, where he barely turned up, and then he had disagreement with Vince, and then he disappeared again. Did you... In that 1996 period when you were managing Bradshaw, did you see Ultimate Warrior at all, basically?
I can't remember.
So he was just completely cut off.
Well, I just know the guy. I know that even trying to, even trying to talk to him was difficult, because he just look at you like, what are you saying? Or you were left trying to debate amongst yourself if he was getting anything at all from what you were saying. Excuse my cough. I probably got the virus again that I've had off and on for seems like 5 months.
No, when you get a virus that you like, you really stick with it.
Oh yeah, Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. A virus I like that I can live with. But and Sting never really. He had some friends, but very few. Because both these guys are they're kind of odd in a way. Sting is not really outgoing, and unless he really knows you really, really well, and he may be, but I've never seen him. I mean, I've never seen Sting kind of have a good time and chuckle and laugh and carry on. He doesn't drink, I don't think, and Ultimate Warrior doesn't drink, not that I know of. But these guys are just odd puppies, I think.
Is CM Punk toxic, or is he just right, surrounded by wrong people?
I like CM Punk. You can talk to him. He can come up to you, and I kind of get him because he has a different type humor about him. I kind of get that. And he got in the wrestling business the right way. He worked for it, went through that Ring of Honor thing. Then he went to WWF, I guess. Yeah.
No, he went to
No, he was
TNA.
WWE.
He went to TNA for a short while as well.
Very, very short.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a month. Maybe. That's when they were still doing TV at the old Fairgrounds Arena. That's where he got in a fight with Teddy Hart.
Yeah.
I've talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was gone. And he did talk favorably about me. Because when I called him over there, I said, all right, this is what I want you guys to do. I'll work it out. And I give it to him. And then I left him. See, an agent is just supposed to give the outcome of the match and help them work through some rough spots. It's up to the talent to get through this match and accomplish what it was intended to accomplish. And he was good at that. He was very good.
I'm going to blow your mind here. CM Punk was in TNA for... Okay, so he had a couple of matches in 2002, which I didn't know. They were all just gauntlet matches. There was one time in January 2003, and then from May 2003 till February 2004, he was there for like 8 months. Would you believe?
No, I don't believe. They may list him like that, but I don't remember him. My recollection, I mean, you can say anything there, but I don't think he was. I don't think he was there for 6 months. I really don't.
Well, there you go. If he was more toxic, you'd remember him. Okay, we will move on. AEW ratings, turns down numbers, more ratings news. So we're actually going to go for Raw first. Now, Raw did the worst regular TV ratings in the history of Raw, aside from best of episodes, with Raw hitting 1.3 million and 0.40 in 18 to 49. Raw went head-to-head with an enormous Buffalo Bills versus New York Jets game that did 22,615,000 across ESPN, ESPN2, and ABC. WWE seemed to know this ahead of time and announced absolutely nothing of importance whatsoever beforehand, because they must have just looked at that line and gone, forget this. We'll just be wasting main event stuff if we put it on this week. And conversely, AEW Collision ratings mostly bounced back, although still lower than average, with 476,000 viewers, up from the week prior's record low of 345. Despite more strong college football competition, it seems that unsurprisingly WWE premium live events, pay-per-views, after Collision ratings Collision ratings the most, with all three lowest Collision ratings airing opposite WWE pay-per-views. Now, we made a big old deal about Collision's ratings last week, just starting off low, and then as soon as the CM Punk announcement by Tony Khan happened, it just fell off a cliff, and it ended with under 250,000 because people were tuning in to see what they saw, and then they tuned right back out again. Probably, and it seems like this sort of indicates that they're all tuning out to go to watch WWE's pay-per-view.
Well, what I'm waiting on CM Punk's response to what happened in AEW.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Tony Khan is waiting for his response too. because this is not him going out and doing an interview just off the top of his head. He has legal representation, and they're telling him what he can say and what he can't say. Of course, AEW, they're looking for that if he wants to cause them any problems, they're looking for something they can sue him. And Punk is looking for the same thing. Punk I read that he had 2 contracts. One was a talent contract, and the other was a producer contract. He had 2, right?
I heard that as well, yeah. I don't know if he did or didn't, but I have heard that, yeah.
I heard that. So, and I'm thinking, well, that's a pretty good chunk of money. It really is. That's why I think is why he's going to WWE. Mm-hmm. Because he was making good money. I mean, great money in AEW. So for him to, and I claimed last week, I think he wanted to get fired, because I think he had an offer waiting on him that they will never find out that he did, because that's tampering, and that is a lawsuit. Mm-hmm. But I think he wants to wrestle again anyway. He wants to wrestle. He wants to be that big star. So I'm going to predict, which I predicted last week, he may just show up on Raw and come out and do another interview. And what do they call the first interview he did?
The Pipe Bomb.
The Pipe Bomb 2, which would be a great follow-up. And all he'd have to do is listen to Pipe Bomb 1 and take the same thing. Now, this would be a great time. This would be a great time for Endeavor to bring him out, and he can talk about Endeavor, and they went together to form this big monster. And see what he said. He could do his own. He could do 3 angles in one interview, or involve 3 people right off the top. I think his first choice would be Seth Rollins. I think he would go after him. And, of course, he's working his way to Roman Reigns. So, and people would say, I don't think they want him. He's too much of a problem. Listen, folks, wrestling is a problem too. It really is. Just because you get a good guy that has done great business, it doesn't mean that he's not a problem. We were just talking about Ultimate Warrior. Mm-hmm. He was always a problem. He wouldn't do this and he wouldn't do that.
Yeah, they kept bringing him back and bringing him back and bringing him back.
And back because Vince liked him. So, and if Vince likes you, and look at Stone Cold, got to the point, he didn't want to do this and he didn't want to do that. So he went home. Vince realizes that, he realized that this guy is a valuable piece of property. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily property, but he's a natural asset to his company, and therefore he's going to kind of humor him and get on his good side, so he'll come back and do what Vince wants him to do. Undertaker is another one. Undertaker didn't always like what Vince had for him, and he'd tell him. And then when push came to shove, Undertaker would just take long periods away and go home. And I guess during all that time, they would be talking by phone. But Vince, if he is going to make the effort to call you, he wants you back. Because Undertaker knew that he wanted him back. And look at Shawn Michaels, all the stuff that he went through with Shawn Michaels and all those guys. So I think that this will be a great time for CM Punk to come back to WWE.
The other thing I mentioned beforehand, now this only came out I think this morning or last night, was the Wembley turnstile count. Now, you had a theory quite a long time ago that I don't even think we put on the podcast, but we were just talking about it off air, and I'll remind you of that in a minute. But it was revealed through a Freedom of Information Act that the Wembley turnstile count, that this was actually people going through the turnstile, so it didn't include, the employees of the arena, people working there, comped tickets. I don't think maybe it did include that as well, actually. I don't know. It's a bit confusing, this, so we have to sort of figure out what it all means. Was actually 72,265. Now, the paid attendance announced by AEW, which is unverified, was 81,035. So a discrepancy of nearly 9,000 there. And WrestleTix has said that the tickets distributed estimated to be 83,131. Now, this isn't entirely unusual. AEW shows can... Essentially, the amount of tickets they sell versus the amount of people that turn up can be anywhere between a 10 to 20% drop. So this represents a drop of 11% from people who bought tickets and this also includes scalpers who couldn't unload the tickets in time or whatever they did with them, to people actually just not attending for any reason or another. But according to this, nearly 9,000 people didn't turn up from AEW's paid attendance record that they claimed on the show.
And what was my theory?
Oh, do you not remember the theory?
Well, I have lots of theories. But
okay. Tony Khan bought some of his own tickets to then scalp later.
Well, I think he did.
You think?
He could have, because those tickets were pretty expensive, right? Not where you sat. Where did you sit?
I sat on the floor, and I got them for the equivalent of $70 each. So actually, I got them really... The reason I got them so cheap was because they just released those seats, because we were sat on the last row where there was a load of production equipment behind us on the floor. So they must have just released them, and they sold them for cheap. So I found them and snapped them up. Okay,
so they're saying they had 82,000.
They're saying 81. Right, okay, so they announced paid attendance 81,035.
Mm-hmm. Well, they can say whatever they want to. And they say it's the highest paid attendance ever?
For a wrestling show. Yeah, they're very specifically saying
for a wrestling show.
Yeah.
How many fans were a Wembley Stadium seat without the floor?
Without the floor, 90,000.
Okay, was the stadium full?
No, it seemed mostly full. There was a few areas.
It seemed mostly full.
It was mostly, well, from my eyes. I mean, I took video and stuff like that. I think some people were complaining that it wasn't full at all, and it's like, that's ridiculous. It was mostly full.
That's like the temperature outside is 99, but it seems like it's 105. Wait a minute. How do you know what it feels like to me? I don't know, but well,
there are a lot of empty seats around where the hard camera was, and the hard camera was in the nosebleed section. There was quite a big patch of red bare seats there, but apart from that, it seemed full.
Well, I don't blame Tony Khan for touting that number, because he can say this till the cows come home. And people said, "Yeah, but that's not the official count." I went through the styles, but let's say the tickets were sold, and for some reason or not, people just didn't come. Or, I mean, 9,000 people buying tickets and not showing up is a little odd to me. I mean, but they could have bought the tickets and they weren't used because the scalpers bought them, and they couldn't sell them because they were probably too high. And then if they're not selling now, you got to drop that price, but they still didn't take them. So they're still 9,000 off on the count. But anyway, I don't blame Tony Khan for claiming that number, because that sets him above WWE, and that gave him at least 3 weeks of bragging rights before this came out. Mm-hmm. So I don't blame him. They can say anything, whatever they want to say. I don't think it matters one way or the other.
Well, the thing with the scalpers is that they have to make a determination of whether something is basically going to sell out or not. And apparently, I imagine quite a few scalpers thought that they would sell 90,000 seats, or 94 or 95,000, including the floor seats, who knows. And maybe what they didn't bank on was that actually, because you asked this before, was it expensive to get in? It was really cheap to get in. There were seats going there for like a buying price of, let's just pluck a number out the air, very rough estimate, about $30 you could get in for. So if you really wanted to go see that show, you could just pay $30, sit up in the upper tier, or $25, whatever, and why would you ever need to go to a scalper? And obviously it never sold out.
I have no idea. I don't know. It's just one of those things. scalpers live on the edge too.
Mm-hmm.
They go to buy it, and if it don't sell, they're stuck with it. They're stuck with a bunch of tickets that they paid for, face value, and that they can't sell. And that could have been a losing proposition for a lot of those scalpers, which I hate scalpers anyway. I really do. I think, especially in like some tickets for Taylor Swift, they were going for on the floor $2,500, $3,000. And some of them went up to $12,000. My daughter just informed me. That's crazy. I mean, you have to really want to see her, but this is not a lot of wrestling, of course, because she hadn't toured in, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years or whatever it was, and she was selling out everywhere. But that doesn't relate to what we're talking about now. No. So anyway, if they did 72,000, they might not claim the record, but that's still I predicted 60 right off the top of my head for no known reason. And then all of a sudden they hit that 60. So now you're thinking, oh, if they hit 60 that quick, well, 90 shouldn't be hard to get. That was like the first day or two. They hit 60,000, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was in the pre-sale. In fact, they got to about 60,000. And then from that, it just sort of like sales trickled in. I mean, they still got to, if it was tickets distributed, estimated by WrestleTix, 83,000, including the scalpers who bought them, or as you claim or posit that maybe Tony Khan maybe bought some as well. And so I don't know. Who knows? Still a huge number.
But yeah, it is a huge number. But it's not, even though 90,000, that's not the biggest paid ticket event in history. Mm-hmm. I worked with the initial Gama Singh in New Delhi, and we did 162,000 fans. Mm-hmm. In the old stadium, 162,000.
Gama Singh.
You don't read about that because
of all people, Gama Singh.
Gama Singh, and he was senior. Gama Singh, and we wrestled, I swear, for like 3 hours and 55 minutes. And Gama Singh, he got tired and blew up, and I pinned him. And the stadium just stood there aghast. He couldn't believe Gama Singh got beat.
You know, there's somebody who will believe you.
Who's that?
There will be someone out there who will be believing you right now.
Gama Singh was a great wrestler. He did like 1,000, squats before he went in the ring.
Very gracious as well to let you take the win in his hometown.
I sit over there and drank a few beers and watched him. But going, in the heat, it was like 110 at 8:00 at night. It was hot. And I know it's a hard story to believe, but
then the dancing bears came out.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I'm looking at my 2 books right behind me, in the screen here, and that will be in my next book, The Match with Gama Singh.
Right.
And I don't know why these guys like Meltzer and Alvarez and whoever they are, I don't know why they don't talk about that match, because it was well advertised.
Are you ready to have some fun?
Yep, I am.
Right, we are going to talk about 2 of the... I think we pick on AEW quite a lot on this show, but we're also going to pick on WWE as well with this. So I've picked out from the last week, for 2 completely separate reasons, 2 of the absolute dirt worst interviews I've ever seen, for completely different reasons. We're going to watch the AEW one first. Now, this is Claudio Castagnoli and Eddie Kingston. Mm-hmm. And just give me a second to tee it up. We'll be back in a sec. Okay, and we're back. And yes, I'm sorry we've got the overlay on and everything. This is AEW. Yes, we've got the right to use it. We've got the right to watch this because we're watching it for review or criticism, essentially. So we're going to listen to about the first 40 seconds of this interview and why it is bad. So here we go.
We appreciate the time of Eddie Kingston, Claudio Castagnoli. This has been an issue that's been a very bitter one.
This is Tony Schiavone speaking
here
now.
At AEW and in Ring of Honor, of course. Claudio, what is going on between you and Eddie? You guys used to be very, very close.
I think that's a question for Eddie to answer, because honestly, I don't even remember.
Oh, you're gonna play this game? The I don't remember game. Like you're better than me. See, this is what I'm talking about. The judgmental that him and Bryan and all these guys do. You know what I'm talking? You know what you did. You know what you did. You left the independents.
Yeah, you know it.
Doing business with me when I considered you a friend, and then you go out and you leave, and you go to the land of make believe.
Sometimes.
So, let's just the crucial sentence there is.
You know what I'm talking? You know what you did. You know what you did. You left the independents without doing business with me when I considered you a friend.
So.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me just get rid of that. There we go. We're back. Oh, whoops. Damn thing. There we go. So, the issue apparently with Eddie Kingston there is, you know what it is. Just explain it. I don't get it.
Well, apparently they were in, I don't really know the reason. I guess they was in Ring of Honor together. And I think that Claudio, or my old friend Cesaro, he left to go to WWE, and he left Eddie high and dry. And now that they're taking that real life incident and making it an angle. And you didn't like the interview, right?
Yeah. Now, he says without doing business. What he means by that, I believe is what he means by that, is that Claudio would not
put him over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He would not put him over. So we're taught. I don't, just having that logic on a wrestling show makes my head boil.
I think that actually went by some fans. It went over their head, like, without doing business means not making, to me, I read into it, not making all of your commitments that you were already booked on. You just high and dry and left me standing out there. Say we had like 2 weeks of matches booked, or 3 or whatever. You left before that and you weren't available to make the match with me. So therefore that can also be considered not doing business. But I do like the way Eddie does his interviews, because he makes them personal. And by the way he talks, he seems pretty well pissed off. So that's what I go by. And I think this would be a pretty good match, because I like both those guys. I like the way Eddie Kingston is straight to the point. And he tells him later on in this interview, you met my mother, and he wants to say something about the mother. And he said, yeah, go ahead. Eddie was telling him, go ahead, say something. I'm daring you to say it. And then they get to the point, and they make the point of the next match, Cesaro or Claudio is going to put up his title, and they're going to end this once and for all. And I didn't think it was it's actually not a bad interview. I think they showed they don't like each other. Their words conveyed that, or did to me. And I kind of liked it. So
I don't think it's the delivery at all that's the issue. For me, it is the fact that he's basically exposed, like, the reason for having a match is because you didn't let me beat you before you left for WWE, and therefore we're going to have another fake match to determine what's going on.
You son of a bitch, you left and you didn't put me over, and I have never forgotten that. And so, by God, we're gonna have another match, and I'm not putting you over there either. So now you're left saying, "Wait a minute, if he's not going to put him over, and he's not going to put, how's it going to go?"
Yeah.
So, but I don't think the average fan reads that into it. You left not doing business. That's what it means.
Mm.
But I don't think I think they could take it several different ways. But the actual feeling I got when I left that interview was these guys are pissed at each other, and I couldn't tell if they're not. I mean, Cesaro left first, and then what I do not like, they both left in the same direction. Wait a minute. If he walks off and another guy walks off 10 seconds later, won't they be on the same side over there talking? Or, on at least the same side of the room? I never liked that. But I think we read too much into it, and this wasn't one of the worst interviews I've ever seen.
No, delivery-wise is absolutely fine. It's just the logic of a feud where it's saying, well, you didn't let me beat you that other time, so now we're going to have a match to which isn't real either. It's anyway. Now we're going to go on. Now we're going to go on to the real shocker, which is a shocker for a completely different reason. This is Byron Saxton interviewing Raquel Rodriguez on this past Monday's Raw. One sec. And we're back, and yes, I'm sorry it's got the overlays again, but this is from TikTok that someone's recorded off their laptop of Byron Saxton and Raquel Rodriguez. Have a listen to this.
Raquel, at Payback, we saw you nearly dethrone the Eradicator. But now, Dirty Dom is
feel the spontaneity,
ringside,
Dutch?
So what kind of thoughts are flowing through your mind as you prepare for this highly
I'm excited already.
rematch against the Nightmare for the Women's World Championship?
Well, Byron, let's just be honest. Rhea might be the most dominant woman to ever step into that ring. Her raw strength and brutality are unlike anything we've ever seen. Rhea has taken over the entire women's division, and it's because people lose to fear before the bell even rings.
Give her the Oscar right now.
I'm not like most people. Y ella sabe eso. She knows that. And Dirty Dom, well, Dom won't be there to help her tonight. No, tonight, Rhea's gonna get a lesson that reality is worse than a nightmare. Because tonight, Rhea won't be the tallest. Rhea won't be the strongest. And Rhea damn sure as hell won't be the angriest woman to step into that ring. Rhea's gonna get a taste of her own medicine. And we'll see who walks out the women's world champion.
Yeah. Yeah, by God. Yeah. Rhea, take that, by God.
Oh, dearie me.
Well, this girl, Rodriguez, she needs to take a few speaking lessons or acting lessons. Because that look, and the interview was written like crap, to tell you the truth. And she's the toughest woman in wrestling. Well, no. He should have said she has established herself as one of the toughest. I think she gave her a little too much credit, but see, they can teach them to wrestle. You can't teach them to talk. Now, Eddie Kingston, the interview we just watched, you kind of believe him. But in this one, you go, please get this over with. You're embarrassing yourself. And she's going to prove she is not the toughest. Did they have a match? This was on Raw, right?
Yeah. Oh, just before I forget, she also did that thing, which is just the most fake thing in the world for interviews, is do that fake laugh. It's like, oh, you think you're so tough? Huh. Well, I'm going to tell you. And it's like, ugh.
Oh, I hate it. Oh, you're picking them apart today, buddy.
Of course I am.
But this is this girl needs work, and we can say that we saw her when she couldn't put like two believable words together. I think this would, but I do appreciate her trying anyway. But whoever produced this interview should have had her do it again and again and again till they got it at least halfway right. But we don't know. This could be the end of 10 interviews. And they finally just got tired of doing it. And he went back and told Triple H, hey, it sounds like shit. Run it anyway, because we got to run it. I mean, you have to run something if you have a spot for her. And no matter really how bad it is, it could have been a lot worse. But this didn't kind of climb the mountain in doing an interview. I mean, I didn't believe it, and I don't think little kids believed it.
Hey, well, in fairness, no one was watching anyway. They were all watching the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets. Are there any particular, when you went back to WWE in the mid-2010s, were there any particular WWE cliches that you just noticed kept coming up in interviews when they were scripting? Because there's a few, like, you know, the whole each and every one of you that always comes up. There's always, today, Byron Saxton, I'm going for the WWE Women's World title. You know, that kind of thing. No one in real life would ever say that.
Well, I can only go by what I had. I had a writer, and he wrote down something one time, like in 1776, the history of the United States. And me being Zeb Coulter, a real American, what he had written down wasn't true. And I said, that's not true. They said, oh, we'll just say it anyway. I said, no, Zeb wouldn't say that. Now, I said, you guys we need to have a meeting of the minds here. What, you want Zeb to be an idiot too? Or do you want him to actually know what he's talking about? Oh, we don't want you to be an idiot. I said, if I say that, I'm an idiot. I said, if I'm just making up something about 1776 and doing something, but it wasn't right. And a first-year history student could tell you that. So if I'm going to do that, I need to at least have my facts right on history. They didn't like it. And they said, well, Vince likes it. I said, well, let's go to Vince. And then they said, well, okay. I'll change it a little bit. He changed a little bit. But on the interview, I just left it out. I mean, what are they going to do? Take a stick and just beat the crap out of me to say it? But I'm not. I mean, they did a lot of things like that. They wanted me to say something one time, and it bordered on really a racist comment. And I told them, I can't say that at all. They said, why not? I said, well, you want me to be a Constitution loving, but I said, that makes me a straight up racist if I say that. And I got Triple H in the back, and I says, I don't want to say this, but if you insist. So I went out there and I altered even what they had written down. I brought it back some. But he told me, he said, go out there and say it, and we can edit it out. So I went out there and said it halfway and come to the back. And then Triple H says, I see what you're talking about. It's gone. We're not going to use it. I said, thank God, not going to use that. Because that won't get you any heat. That would just get you some, well, it actually hurts you to say stuff like that. So we didn't use it. And my whole time I was there with Triple H, he was the one who actually I talked to the first day when I got hired on. And he was always a straight shooter with me, and I could always talk to him. And, they wanted to take that saying to Vince, but Vince don't give a crap. And he would have said, do it, pal. But the writer was afraid to take it because he wasn't sure of his standing with Vince. And now that writer's gone. He left with Bray Wyatt. Before Bray Wyatt, he left. I don't know where he went. He's a pretty good guy. And that's what I suggested in WWE. I said, listen, don't give me a different writer every week. And they said, well, we do that for a reason. I said, why? They said, well, it keeps the writer from getting stale and all. I said, no, if I have the same writer, now we know what we're talking about. And they more or less kept me with one writer, though. And the writer that wanted me to do the other thing about 1776, he was a substitute writer that week, and I didn't much like him anyway. So, but I got it cleared up, went on my merry way, and it is what it is. And I ended up here today telling that story here on Storytime with Dutch. Mm-hmm. See, you won't hear it anywhere else.
We have got one more bit of news, and then we've got our main event. This has only just been coming out maybe yesterday, I think. I wasn't paying that much attention, to be honest. Jade Cargill may be done with AEW. She was beaten by Chris Statlander, clean, and the belief is that she is gone from AEW. Your thoughts on Jade? I don't know how much you saw her wrestle on Rampage when you were doing the reviews.
Oh, she was great in the ring. She's a big, strong girl, too. But they didn't really give her much of a personality at all. You had a manager one time, and she may have had a manager the whole time. But I never really got a clear shot at what she could do inside a story. because I know she went like 43-0, one lost record. But that one loss record, that don't mean nothing, really. It's a story. And what I mean by that, look at Sami Zayn. He lost every match for a year when I was watching SmackDown. Every match. And all of a sudden, they put him in something with the bloodline, took their time with it, incorporated him in that story, and then look where it took him. And he's still over today because he got in a story. Now, he can do great interviews too. And Jade can't match that, because I think they did her a disservice by not teaching her how to do interviews. And you really, she just went, she's a heel. So she went out and she just beat girls right in the middle of the ring. And I've said this forever. What is the heat in that? There's no heat there. She just beat the girl. So why are you going to get mad because she just beat a girl? I mean, she has talent. So I think Jade, what's her name again?
Jade. Yeah, Jade Cargill.
Jade. Okay.
Yeah.
Listen, I do say, I was reading one of the letters that was sent in. That James, they like you to keep me on topic because not retelling a story that I told 10 times earlier. Listen, folks, I may tell a story a little more than I need to because I want you to get hit on the head a couple of 100,000 times and see if you can stay on topic sometimes. But anyway, I think the Jade girl, very talented. I didn't like the way they handled her. And if she's gone from AEW, I don't know if she's going to WWE or not, but that's the only thing why would she leave there?
I think
she's getting a check.
I think it's been presumed that she's probably going to go to WWE. Is she going to be a good enough fit for there? Because, at the top of women's wrestling, you need to be able to go in the ring. You need to be able to go on the mic. Is she going to be able to hang with the top ladies in WWE?
Guess what? We're going to see if she goes there. So, and I think by giving her, I think Tony, he gave her that 43-0 record. Who beat her?
Just this past day, Chris Statlander, I think, yeah.
And that was the girl that was hurt, and she's just coming back. I think. I don't watch AEW.
I'll defer to
I used to watch AEW because I was required on my other podcast that I do with Sportskeeda.
You only do SmackDown now?
I only do SmackDown now. Because AEW didn't get, and I'll tell you why. The internet, and especially podcasts, are click crazy. The more clicks you get, the more financially rewarded you are. And it got to the point to where I heard that AEW wasn't getting the traffic. Is that a good word for it? Traffic?
Mm-hmm.
That Raw got. I mean, that SmackDown got. And when we were talking about AEW, and some shows have been really, really good. And some shows just sit there and, looked at you. Or I sit there and looked at them. But it's SmackDown did good and AEW didn't. So that's why we stopped doing it.
I didn't know that. Now, finally, the main event of the podcast. I know we've done mostly news this week, but to reiterate what I said at the beginning of the show, we, at the end of last week, so we the people, that we were interested, or more specifically, you were interested, because you asked me to find out, that who were the Storytime with Dutch Mantell listeners also listening to in the wrestling sphere. You wanted to know exactly who they were listening to, who were their favourite podcasts, and who were not.
How many responses did we get?
Well, I thought it was going to get a few dozen. We got probably about 430, which is Did people email you as well and tell you?
A few.
Yeah, I got quite a lot.
But they went to your spot, not to mine.
Oh, okay then. So yeah, I got quite a lot of emails as well. But
most of the people I got were all anti-James.
Yeah. No, I don't blame them.
I agreed with them.
Yeah, get a new co-host for God's sake. And there's a few different things I want to actually bring. So I actually got my editor Chris to do it for me this time, because when I had to go through the comments of the community board last time on YouTube, by the way, I actually asked on the community board on Storytime with Dutch Mantell YouTube channel, and that's where we got all these responses. It's a great way to get sort of news out, really, for the channel and everything. And I said, Chris, look, I can't be bothered this time because it took me hours and hours to do the one 3 weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, when we did the greatest wrestlers never to hold a world title. I thought it took me like an hour. It took me like 4 or 5. It was ridiculous how long I was there trying to tally up. So I said, Chris, you do it. I can't be asked. So he did it, and he apparently couldn't be bothered to get an A4 piece of paper to write all these down because he sent me a photo, and Chris put this in now, a photo of his little desk with the laptop and about 30 yellow Post-it notes everywhere on the desk trying to write down everything. So he sent him through, and he has collated a list of the most loved and the least loved. And what was his name? Chris.
Chris, you did a great job.
Yes, well done, boy.
I'll put you over, Chris. James won't, but I will.
Oh God, no. He's the boy to me. Got to keep the workers down. Anyway, a couple of things. Storytime with Dutch Mantell is disqualified from because we would have come first. Because we are Storytime with Dutch Mantell. So
we do a Tony Khan. We'd say, no, we came in first. Whatever the top number is, we would come in about 10 above that.
Yeah, the turnstile number for us was about 10 better than the actual number one. Similarly, WSI and quite a few people actually said Franchise University with Shane Douglas, even though it's only been out for 3 weeks. Also said that as well, which is very kind of you all, but they're disqualified as well. So anything associated with me, very much this podcast as well, is disqualified because, for obvious reasons, it's a bias. So we also specifically mentioned podcasts, but a few people here and there also mentioned other YouTube channels as well. So, having said all that, shall we get to, because the worst is always the most fun list. Should we get to the best? So, oh my God, how many pages has he written, for goodness sake? Should we do the one mentionees first, or should we start at like 4 or something so we don't burn ourselves out here?
Well, what was number 1?
Oh no, we're gonna go one mention and then we're gonna go upwards. We have to save number 1.
Oh, okay.
Okay then. So
start wherever.
Okay, one person mentioned the following: Sean Ross Sapp, Vince Russo. One person mentioned Vince Russo. There's some people I've never heard of before: Stephen Larson, John McAdam, Sean Goodwin, Monty and the Pharaoh, Swerve Strickland. Matt Hardy only got one vote. Blue Meanie, you should check out Blue Meanies because he's a top man. Dave Meltzer, one person said. Colt Cabana, one person said, which is really surprising considering how long he's been doing it. Kevin Sullivan, OSW, Stick to Wrestling, Austin Idol. I'm pretty sure he hasn't had a podcast in years. Roddy Piper, he's been dead 8 years and someone said it.
No kidding.
Hannibal, so there must be someone missing a chromosome out there to say Hannibal. Wrestle Talk, Corey Graves. One person said Corey Graves. Kevin Dagger, never heard of him. Dr. Lucha Libre, never heard of it. Wrestling Days, never heard of it. Barstool Wrestling and Wrestling Soup, which I've never heard of either. So they were all the people who got mentioned once. The people who got mentioned twice: Don Morocco. We haven't done a podcast, Don and I, in 2 years, or a year and a half at least. Reliving the War, which is a YouTube channel, actually, not a podcast, but that's very good, and the guy's a cool dude as well. JD from NY, that's rubbish as bar, I think. Honky Tonk Man, I didn't realise he had a podcast, if he does have one. Bucking the Territories, Dr. Tom Prichard, I didn't realise he had one. Brian Solomon, Stevie Ray, Busted Open Radio, that one that you mentioned recently.
But they haven't done a podcast in how long?
No, they still do the radio shows, they just don't update the YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
Chris Jericho. Only 2 people said Chris Jericho, of all people. Can you believe? Road Dogg.
And he's got 1 million followers on his Twitter account.
Yeah. Only 2 people said him. Road Dogg. Only 2 people said Gangrel and Brian Alvarez. Now I've got to go backwards here. Bear with me. People who got 3 mentions: Rob Van Dam, Stevie Richards, who doesn't actually have a podcast per se. He's got a YouTube channel, but 3 people mention him. Raven, that I can't believe still got a podcast, but he has. Lapsed Fan, Wrestle Me, What Culture, Chris Van Vliet, which isn't sort of a podcast maybe. Wrestling Bios.
Chris who? Van Fleet.
Yeah, Chris Van Vliet.
Who in the hell is he?
Oh, I think he's, I don't know what.
He's a writer, isn't he?
No. He's he does similar. Well, say he does similar to me. I do similar to him because he started first with the main channel. He interviews people. The last 3 that I mentioned there, the last 3 may not actually be podcasts, but it's good YouTube content. And Simon Miller from What Culture is well liked specifically. Now, 4 likes for Cultaholic, Ted DiBiase's podcast, and Francine's podcast, who's the only female or the only lady on the list. Now, let's get to the meat of the matter here.
I think there is another female, whether she does a podcast or not. What is her name? She was on...
She ain't on this list. Renee Paquette does one. Not a single person mentioned it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, 5 mentions for Stone Cold Steve Austin, even though he hasn't done a podcast in years. 6 mentions for Kurt Angle and Ric Flair. Now, Ric Flair hasn't really done a podcast in ages, really, either. 7 mentions for a friend of the show, Ron Fuller, and Solo Monster. Now, number 9, or 9
Solo, is it Solo Monster? Who does that?
I don't know what his name is. Just Solo Monster speaks.
Is he a wrestler?
I think he's just a fan who talks on wrestling.
Okay.
And now we're getting to the good stuff now. So, 9 mentions for Jake Roberts.
Ask me how many of those podcasts I've listened to.
How many?
0. Go ahead.
9 mentions for
Jake the Snake.
I'd
like to hear Jake, so.
He might be featuring in the worst of as well. And Booker T for 9 mentions. Now, also for 9 mentions, Tony Schiavone. Now, from here on out, I'm going to start giving reasons or even a quote. So this is an amalgamation of all the reasons given for why they like the pod. Tony Schiavone's was rather muted. It's all right, but people listen to it. And Todd Edwards here has said Tony and Conrad have good chemistry.
You say muted? Muted?
Yeah, muted praise. So it's all right.
Like toned down. Okay.
Yeah. Now we're going to get into the big boys now. 12 mentions.
Are we in the big boys?
No, we had to disqualify ourselves from it because we were tops
Yeah.
otherwise.
Well, okay, I got it.
Excuse me. Briscoe and Bradshaw. 12 mentions. It seems that Briscoe is more liked than Bradshaw on it. but everyone has love for Briscoe.
I think John, he's being typical John, and he'll make you mad at him. Because I think he's a heel on that show. John will not miss an opportunity to be a good heel. But he's hilarious. He's really funny, I think. And I'd listen to him.
Do you know, that's probably the only podcast that's like strictly interviewing that I will listen to because I've interviewed Jerry. I've talked to John, but not really have talked to John, but he's always been he's mentioned me on his podcast a couple of times, been very, very kind, so hopefully we can get one or both of them on one day. Number 13, a fairly new one, Rene Dupree, with 13 mentions, not overly analytical, but funny, is the general consensus on his podcast.
He's French-Canadian, right?
He is.
I met him in WWE.
Did you?
I'd never known him to have a sense of humor, to tell you the truth. He was just there. Nice guy. He was always treated me fine, but I don't know if I'd want to listen to him.
Well, it's all right. No one's forcing you to. Now, next on the list, Mick Foley with 15 likes or mentions, essentially, says good, but can avoid juicy topics.
What does that mean?
How do you mean?
He's good when he avoids juicy topics.
Yeah, he is good, but he can avoid juicy topics. So the real, more controversial stuff he will dance around.
Oh, he won't say one way or the other.
He might be a bit of a fence sitter. Next, with 18 mentions, Jeff Jarrett, Arn Anderson, and Bruce Prichard, all tying and typically rated as good. Mm-hmm. No one like raving over them, but good and listenable. A lot of people have actually said, especially with Bruce Prichard, is that before he went to WWE, it was one of the best shows out there. And ever since he went back to WWE 1, he's probably got far less time.
Now, he is muted. but he can't say things because WWE and now Endeavor, he may even cancel his whole. He still does a podcast, correct?
He does, yeah.
Okay.
But apparently since he went back to WWE in 2019, 2020, whenever it was, the shows have fallen, maybe not fallen off a cliff, but nowhere near as good.
You've told me he would do 3-hour podcasts.
And the rest. 3-day podcasts sometimes. Yeah, some of them, there must have been tickling 5 hours.
Who in the hell could listen to a podcast? I know you only listen for a part of it, but hell, I couldn't sit and watch anything for 5 hours. I don't care. So
I can't be surrounded by my loved ones for 5 hours. I have to tell them to leave the house or something, or just go away. You know what I mean?
Yeah, get out. Damn it, leave.
Next on the list. 19 positive mentions for Jim Ross. Good knowledge and paints a good picture.
I agree.
Next one.
But I couldn't listen to Jim Ross though.
Why not?
Well, I've been around him so much, and I know the way he talks. I know his frequencies, and like my mind would go back where I first met him in Shreveport, Louisiana, and you never got a straight answer from Jim when I was in Mid-South or in WCW, really. You never got that straight answer because he's a political guy and he knows what he can say and what he can't say. So if you go to him for an answer, you'll get an answer, but you get an answer that's so toned down, you don't know what the answer is. So that's to protect him. And I don't blame him.
Is Jim Ross a bit frustrating in that sense that if he's hired by someone, he always toes the company line? Maybe that's why he's been hired for 50 years. If I hire somebody, I want them to be an extension of me and believe the way I do. I don't blame him, but you won't get possibly you could get a straight answer if he finally said, listen, it don't look good for you or whatever. Or say, are they going to use me, or are they going to put me low down on the card or whatever? And he would probably tell you that. So, and then you have to deal with it. What wouldn't you talk to you about then? What would you, if you asked him something that you knew you won't get a straight answer from, what would you ask him?
Okay, say a guy comes in and the earlier WCW group, you were paid, I was, by appearance till I finally got it down to a straight number every week. And I'd want to know, hey, how many shots I got next month? And he would say, not many, or you're booked all month. So when I brought that up, when they put it at a straight number, guess what happened? I was booked everywhere because my number, whatever it was, instead of paying me by individual events, and this number wouldn't change no matter if they used me 1 time or 10 times, I still made the same amount. So therefore, let's put him on as many as we can to get our money's worth. Which I didn't mind that. At least I was working.
We will move on to our next one. Bit of a jump. 24 good positive mentions for Conan and Disco Inferno. Good content if they can stay on topic, and Lou Rice Music writes, Conan is pretty good, but they have a ton of ads and answers to fan questions can be a little short. They don't have a filter, or they don't filter a lot of their criticisms, which is really important in a good podcast.
Okay, what does that mean? They don't filter a lot of their criticisms. They get criticized on their show?
No, what they're saying is if they're criticizing AEW or WWE, they won't have a filter on it. They won't be political like Jim Ross might be. They will be. Okay. They will say what is actually on their mind.
Well, there's ways to say things. You don't have to just bury somebody. But this business is very, very actually tough to do. And not everybody is going to agree with the way you do it. We don't agree with the way they do it. but I don't think put him down too badly, except for some interviews.
I mean,
okay.
Next one, just one positive mention more. Eric Bischoff, with good topics and timekeeping, and Bischoff is good when you want to hear an honest critique of AEW.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever meet Bischoff?
Oh, yeah, a lot. I was around him. I was around him when he was around the clique. He was around the Scott Halls, and I think it was Scott Hall.
No, that was in WCW 96. You weren't there. If you met Eric in the business, it would have been when he was a self-professed third-string announcer in WCW after AEW closed.
No, I was there when he was the head of it. I was there when he was the head of it.
He was in 1993 when he got promoted.
I was there, around there.
You weren't in 93.
Well, where was I in 93?
Oh, don't tell me.
You tell me.
You were in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, I think, in 93.
Yes, I was. And I didn't work there. That's what it is. I went down there to center stage. That's what I did. And he was running it in 93.
I didn't know this. So you used to go to WCW in the early 90s. How come?
Only once. Only one time. I was passing through and I said, well, I ought to go down and see these guys. And I went down and introduced myself. First time I ever met him right there. And, but he was in charge of it.
Was this for like the power plant or something, or were you just going to just see the TV?
No, I went to center stage. They're doing TV there. I remember that.
We will move on.
Hey, don't ask me where I've been. I have no idea where in the hell I have been, because I have, seriously, vast stretches of my wrestling past. It's like just a big vacuum.
Hey, that's what I'm here for, man. That's what I'm here for.
No, I wasn't there. And in 94, I went to Puerto Rico. 94, 95, 96, I went to WWF.
95, you went WWF.
Right. 95, I did go there. 95, 96.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Puerto Rico in 94. And then it becomes a blur again. And becomes a blur again. Then I went to Puerto Rico a couple of times. And then I went to TNA, and I was there for like 9 years.
Yeah. Next one, a big jump up with 32 likes, Kevin Nash.
Have you listened to his podcast?
No. Have you?
Are you going to listen to it?
No. I haven't got time to listen to podcasts. I make podcasts. That takes up all my time.
Yeah, it does.
No, you've listened to Kevin Nash a bit, haven't you?
Just in the car. Hey, he's hilarious to travel with. He is a funny son of a gun. So he told me one time he got into boxing. And there used to be a boxing promoter in Knoxville, because he played college basketball at the University of Tennessee. And I can't remember this boxing promoter, but he got into boxing, and the guy liked him, and he booked him in a boxing match in Miami Beach.
What?
Yes. And
right.
he drove all the way from Knoxville down through Chattanooga, down through Atlanta, down to Macon, down to Florida. Then he came through Orlando, and then he got on, I think, Interstate 4 it's on the east coast of Florida. No, he got on 95 and went all the way to Miami and had this fight with some Cuban guy that he'd never heard of. He said he won the fight, but that Cuban guy beat the living shit out of him. He said, I don't know how I won the fight. And he says, coming back, now I got to go back. That's like at least 1,000 miles, at least. So he said, I was driving back, and he said, I thought to myself, this is when he got into wrestling. He said, there's got to be an easier way to make a living than boxing. He said, that was my last boxing match. And he says, I went back, and then I found my way into wrestling. But when he's telling that story, oh my God, I was rolling. And I said, what'd you make for the match? He says, not enough. I think he made like $500 or something, and drove and drove 2,000 miles with a swollen eye, almost a broke nose. But he's telling this story, and he was hysterical. He was hilarious when he was telling, and I need to call Kevin. I said, tell me that story again. So you ought to look up Kevin Nash's boxing career and see if it lists that match.
Yeah, did it go for one bout only, or did he actually have quite a few?
I don't think he had but just one match. Said he trained to be a boxer, and this guy that's pretty well known as a promoter out of Knoxville, and they had a champion there, a heavyweight champion that he managed the champion for like, I don't know, not too long, because champion got his butt beat after he won the title quickly. But hilarious story. We should write to him and see if he'll cover that on his podcast.
Or on this podcast, because we probably get views out of it.
Okay, we'll get him here.
That's the spirit. Briefly, his co-host is Sean Oliver. Sean Oliver used to do the U-Shoot and kayfabe commentaries kind of thing. Any stories with Sean?
Say what now?
Any stories about Sean or just dealings with Sean?
No, I just met him when I did those interviews with him.
All right.
I don't know where he's from. I just did just an interview with him, and he put that on YouTube.
Well, I think a lot of people put it on YouTube. But, okay, that was number 2. Kevin Nash with 32 likes. Do you want to have a wild guess at who was the most loved podcast, aside from us, of people who wrote in?
I'm going to take a guess.
Go on.
Jim Cornette.
Now keep in mind that Kevin Nash came in second with 32. Mm-hmm. Jim Cornette came in first with 178. People speaking positively about him. Great when talking old wrestling, funny, good as long as he's not talking about political stuff or blasting modern wrestling, apparently with the criticisms. But here's a couple of people who wrote in. Mr. Magic said, Cornette's podcast is a blast. Jim is vicious and witty. His knowledge of wrestling history seems pretty much endless, and his obscure boomer references are also a lot of fun. Also, Travis doing the artwork is very, very good at visualizing some of Cornette's ideas. So there you go. Jim Cornette, unsurprisingly, wins the favorite podcast in the wrestling genre.
But you told me that he doesn't do a video podcast like this.
No, audio only.
It's just him. Okay, just him talking.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he is they call Jimmy Hart the mouth of the South. I think Cornette would actually be a close runner-up to Jimmy. He couldn't out-talk Jimmy. But Jim Cornette, he does know a lot about history.
It's because Jimmy Hart doesn't sleep, does he?
I don't think he does. I mean, I used to take Jimmy, of course, he was a manager in Memphis, and he'd get on the apron, and we used to do a deal. All of a sudden, he's looking out at the crowd, and he turns around, and I'm there, right? And oh God, and I grab him by the hair. I'll never forget this. And I may have said this before. Right before I hit him, he'd always say, I love you, poo-poo. Now, who could hit a guy hard when they just told him, I love you, poo-poo? But I'll say one thing, Jimmy Hart was very, very fast around that ring. So I chased him one time, and he never thought I could catch him, and I never did. But one time he went around the corner, and it was a little bit slippery, and he lost one step. And then I caught him. But even doing that, he didn't think I could catch him. I only caught him one time. and we were shooting around that ring. We were flying. So, and Jimmy, great manager. Sometimes he would go out to the ring, and I was looking at a card from Louisville. He would manage this guy that would go up against Lawler. Then he'd manage the tag team guys that go up against the tag team champions. And he would manage sometimes 4 or 5 guys. So when he went to Louisville, he was out there at least 75% of the time. And he never lost his heat. See, it's like almost seeing somebody over and over and over. And he had more heat at the end of the night because he was entertaining to watch. And great talker. He was a good guy. He really was.
It was a very touching tribute to Jim Cornette with several Jimmy Hart stories. Still, what else can you say about Jim? We know what's the score is with Jim. Now, this is the thing that we really, really are interested in. It is the most hated. Or least liked, if we're going to be kind about it. So, we'll go from...
The least liked podcast people.
Yes, the least liked.
Yeah.
So, I'm actually going to time code that because I'm going to forget if I don't now. So, we're going to go from 3 dislikes upwards, okay? So, 3 people said Hannibal, even though it isn't a podcast. Road Dogg.
Well, Hannibal, I did his show. Mm-hmm. And I've said this before. He talks in a monotone. Mm-hmm. He never changes it. And he doesn't really have any viewpoints on anything. He just says whatever. And you get your conclusion from that and you go. Now, he doesn't really have it's a podcast with low energy is what it is. Mm.
Next, Road Dogg and Ric Flair and Mick Foley all got 3 dislikes. Next on the list is Tony Schiavone.
Wait a minute. Why would Road Dogg get a dislike?
Co-host, maybe?
I don't know. Road Dogg to me is kind of, I like to listen to him. Love to talk to him.
Yeah.
Because he's funny. And who else did you see got 3, did you say got 3 dislikes?
Ric Flair and Mick Foley.
Well, I could see Ric Flair.
Are you surprised he didn't get more dislikes?
And Mick, what I think Mick doesn't ever take a position one way or the other. Like he was he's in the middle. And you got to go one way or the other, please. If you make somebody mad, so what? That's life.
Well, let's try and make some more people mad then. With 5 dislikes, Tony Schiavone. The reasons being that he used to be good, but apparently it might just run its course, and too many adverts, which weirdly is going to be a theme with a lot of these dislikes. But next on, also with 5 dislikes, Conan.
How many? Let me ask you something.
Yes.
How many followers would Tony Schiavone have?
On what, YouTube?
Wherever he puts them.
I don't know on the podcasts because I can't really find out those numbers, but on YouTube I can look if you want me to.
Yeah, look it up.
Okay, I've just found 35,600.
How many do we have?
93,000.
93. And he has 35 or whatever.
You're just using this platform to just lord it over podcasts who aren't doing as well as us.
Well, I'm just saying that. And the reason we have 93,000 subscribers, that people that like this podcast, and we're just sitting here shooting the crap back and forth. And do you know how long these podcasts are?
That can vary wildly.
You need to put Chris, he needs to give us more information. We need to research our opposition.
I can't keep paying him this much money. I probably paid him for 5 hours' work just to go through goddamn one list, for God's sake. You could bankrupt me. Right, let me get through a few more of these then. Conan and Disco also got 5 dislikes. The reasons being rambling, argumentative, make fun of you if you don't agree with them, and bad audio. Which I can say bad audio, for God's sake. I mean, they need some proper microphones. But we're going to get a lot of the same names for most disliked and most liked, purely because they're the most famous ones anyway. So you're always going to get your people who like him, dislike him.
Yep.
Next one, Dave Meltzer, 6 dislikes. Reasons being too biased.
How many did Dave Meltzer get dislikes?
Just 6.
I think he would have got a lot more.
Well, you didn't vote.
I didn't vote. I didn't know we had a vote. It was on your page, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It was on our page. I didn't vote. Could I have voted?
Yeah. Or maybe that would have come under like bias then. I don't know.
Oh, no, but you said we were outlawed. We were out.
Yeah, from ourselves. We can't say ourselves or anything associated with me. Next, with a jump up to 11 dislikes, Eric Bischoff. Some people said dull and very anti-AEW.
Mm-hmm. He is. I don't know if he's dull. I mean, I don't know.
I find it quite interesting.
I'll never listen to him.
Next one. With 15 dislikes, Jim Cornette. Angry, irritating, or too political were the reasons. Guinea Pigs Rule wrote, Jim Cornette, even though he annoys me, he still has esoteric wrestling knowledge.
Esoteric, what's that mean?
I don't know. Otherworldly. I mean, I like the word, but I can't actually put it into a sentence.
I do like, I love the word. I'm going to have to look that up now.
Maybe it's like all-encompassing.
But he is, if you're a Republican or a conservative in the United States, Cornette, I mean, in political views, don't listen to Cornette because he is a liberal Democrat all the way. He hated Trump. He hates anything Republican. And you know, if you really want to separate people, what are the two things you shouldn't talk to people about? They always say
3: politics, religion, and money.
Yep. And if one of them puts you off, you're all the way off.
Mm-hmm.
But he is very, very outspoken in his political views.
Esoteric, intended... I was going to give you a definition then.
Oh, give me the definition.
Intended for or likely to be understood by only a small number of people with a specialized knowledge or interest. So I was way off base there.
All right. Whatever that means, I don't know how you could apply that to Cornette's podcast, but...
He has esoteric knowledge, so therefore he's very highly specialized knowledge of wrestling.
Well, he does that. I was in the political realm at the
I'm sorry.
I thought we were talking about political views, but he does. Yes, if he talks wrestling, he knows what he's talking about, he knows history about wrestling.
Mm-hmm. 16 dislikes for Kevin Nash. Bitter, boring, or out of touch were the people's complaints of Kevin Nash's show. Jace wrote, I like Sean Oliver, and I think he's always had great chemistry with Kevin Nash during his kayfabe commentary shoot interviews, but on Click This, when they're talking about things that aren't related to wrestling, they frequently end up boring me to tears. Kevin Nash seems to think his takes on current events are interesting and or profound, but they're very basic. They don't offend anyone. They're just boring. When they talk about wrestling, they're all right.
Yeah, when they talk about that, that's what the podcast should be about. Wrestling.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, I think a lot of them, they want to go out on the limb and talk political and get more of the of that. And people, listen, if people wanted to talk politics, they would find a political podcast. They want to talk wrestling. And we have different views on it. We all do. But yet you can have a different opinion on wrestling and still not be wrong. I mean, just because you view a certain performer one way, it means I may view him another way. But yet, the person could listen to us and see why you don't like him and I do. But it's about pro wrestling, and that's what they tune in to hear.
Mm-hmm. Next one with 18 dislikes. Vince Russo, always the victim, overuse of the word bro.
I mean, seriously, I like Vince. You can only take bro so many times, because I have taken it in a day's time. At least he would say it over 100 times. Bro, bro, bro. And I would look at him and I'd say, bro, please stop it. Okay, bro. Okay. But that's the way he talks. It's his go-to word. And I don't really hate Vince. A lot of people just kind of hate him. I don't know why. I mean, but you got to take people the way they are. I'll say one thing about him, and I've said this before. He's a hard worker. I don't agree with about 90% of his ideas, but by God, the worst idea ever is the one that's not presented. And he will present them to you. And they could be stupid, but that's what creative teams do. They come up with ideas. Not all of them are going to work. Probably only about 10% of them will work, but yet the rest of the creative team has to hear it so they know what to throw out and keep in.
Do you remember, I'm going to put you on the spot here, do you remember like the worst idea that Vince Russo ever came up with that either did or didn't get on TV?
Well, it just did get on a pay-per-view. Ready for this?
Go on.
It was a midget. Can I still say midget? A vertically challenged person in like a dumpster. And one of the female announcers interrupted him, and he was in the middle of masturbating.
But look how happy it made you.
Yeah, it did. It was hilarious. It really was. But and that was the little midget idea. So that was in the early days of TNA, and I never forgot that.
Is that the one? Was that the same midget?
And he did have an interview with Roddy Piper.
Yeah.
Did you ever see that?
We covered it on the show. We watched it together. It was really awkward.
And I was there, and I still don't remember it. I know what I'm talking about. I remember when it was going on, and it got to a point, I think, wait a minute. These guys are way over the line now. And they were like, I don't know, Piper was ripping him, and he was ripping Piper back, and I don't remember watching that with you. When was that?
I think it was a while ago in Fez. I'm actually just got the video up on my phone of the midget in the dustbin, and he's getting interviewed now. I won't bring that up on the thing. I believe that was Puppet, the Psycho.
Yep.
No, it was Puppet did Psycho Dwarf, and at one point he also brings a gun out and points it at Jeff Jarrett.
I kind of remember that. See, when you're in creative, you don't get to sit at a monitor. If you're the head of creative, you can. But I was running around the back, getting guys to the ring, getting them, lined up, get them to the go position. So, and I don't have a monitor right in front of me. So what's actually going out, I'm not taking in, and I can miss almost 80% of the show, really. All I would get to watch, because I have nothing else to do, is probably the main event of the show. But I do remember the little midget in the trash can doing the old whack the mo, the old whack job. So that was crazy.
Now, most hated, most reviled by far of all the podcasts, and it isn't actually a podcast, it's a podcaster. Do you want to have a guess?
I know who it is.
Go on, tell me.
Conrad Thompson?
Yep.
And I said that about him a long time ago. I like Conrad. But when he does a podcast, he does almost as much talking as the guy doing the podcast. I watched Jeff Jarrett, What Is My World, with Jeff.
Yeah.
And he's asking questions, especially questions about TNA. And you can tell Jeff gets a little bit miffed at him a little bit himself, because he's bringing all this stuff up, and I mean, stuff that you could easily skip over. And it doesn't really paint TNA in a positive light. And Jeff is doing it and trying to do it right. And Jeff is kind of, in his podcast, I think he does a good job, a great job. And he's kind of middle of the road. But here's Conrad picking all the bad stuff up that he can, and he's leaving Jeff to defend it. So And I think he talks too much on his podcast for his own good. And his guest or his host, the guy doing the podcast, for their good. And that's why he ended up with the number of negative votes that he got. How many did he get?
Well, Vince Russo had 18 dislikes. Conrad Thompson had 44.
Wow. Really?
Mm-hmm.
I may have you pause here for a second.
Okay.
How many listeners does Conrad have on the Jeff Jarrett Show?
I can only tell you on subscribers, but 1 second. I've found the information out. 31,600 subscribers on YouTube.
For Jeff's show?
Yeah.
What's the number one show in Conrad Thompson's? What's he call his whole deal?
The Conrad Thompson Network. I'm making that up. I don't know. I can't remember. I'm sure it has got a name. Anyway.
31,000. Wow.
Yeah.
I thought they'd have more.
Of the top one, of all the YouTube... I can't go on the podcast, all the YouTube channels... I don't know if Kevin Nash counts. I think it might sort of count, Kevin Nash, even though Conrad's not on it. But I think Kevin Nash is the only one who beats us in monthly views. And that doesn't count last month because we beat him, Kevin Nash, in monthly views because we had a good month.
Really?
Yeah. So we are, apart from Cornette, of that month, we were the second most viewed after Cornette. YouTube weekly podcast show on YouTube, I think. Anyway, yeah. So
we need to advertise that fact.
What, the second most watched or third most watched YouTube podcast wrestling based with a single wrestling personality?
Well,
that's too many asterisks, really, isn't it?
That's too many parameters. Just put number 2 podcast.
Yeah. Turnstile numbers. We got number 2.
And we're the best.
I'm going to agree with this. So I had to. So anyway, this is what Chris has said. The editor said I had to start Conrad Thompson's own tally after I realised people hated him more than the wrestlers he was talking to. He hosts, and his pods are basically one long infomercial. So it is the unbelievable amount of advertising. Hey, Blue Chew. Hey, a hot tag for your wieners. Like, shut up. You hear the same advert so many times over and over again, and just all the podcasts are absolutely full of them.
Okay. A blue, what is it? Blue tube?
No, and yeah, it's some like chewable Viagra thing.
Yeah, I know what it is.
Oh, Blue Chew.
But what do they pay him?
I don't know.
31,000 subscribers.
I don't know. Do you want me to call and ask?
Well, we're looking for subscribers, looking for sponsors, aren't we?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, well, maybe this might be the latest podcast to have like advertise boner chewing gum. I should be nicer to him just in case we actually do get sponsored by him. Also, a lot of dislikes for anyone Conrad pods with, but they are generally targeting Conrad, but not always. Few people said Keith P. Storytime, the drive-through, Click This, and 83 Weeks are the ones that he likes, and a lot of times I just do clips of Click and 83 because the amount of ads Conrad shows is absolutely insane. This other fella said, I can miss Conrad. He makes the shows about himself, as you said. And then Red Fox Punks says, the other wrestling podcast I could do without is Jericho's. The Conrad podcast and the majority of wrestling podcasts, they're either too high on themselves, not into it, or always shilling crap to their audience. And frankly, none of these people main evented Wembley and helped dying children with the stench of death on them, so why bother? So it's a good callback from Hulk Hogan 2 weeks ago as well.
That is good. The stench of death upon them. I mean,
it is.
Where did that come from?
Oh, God. Oh, it's from Hulk Hogan, who can smell death on dying children at Wembley. Man,
it's too much.
He's
too much.
He's got senses. He's got senses that you and I can only dream of.
Oh yeah, he's.
But
I made a trip with Hulk Hogan when he was first starting out. We made a trip, and I was in Florida, but he's from Tampa, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We made a trip to Tallahassee, and his name was Terry Golden, I think. That's his wrestling name. And we made this trip up, and the whole trip to Tallahassee is about a little more than 3 hours, and 3 hours back. So for 6 hours, I listened to Hulk Hogan talk about himself. And he was like, he'd only been in the business like 2 months, 3 months, maybe. And we were going up there, and I remember watching his match that night, and it was okay. And coming back, and he asked me, he said, "Do you see my match?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And how was it? And it was okay, but it wasn't outstanding. So it was all about him and his football playing and his weightlifting and his, the playing the bass and the band. And it was all about him. So for 6 hours, I learned all about Huck, and I never rode with him again because there was nothing else for us to talk about.
You could have talked about yourself for 6 hours next time.
He don't want to talk about that.
No, all right,
at all.
Okay, anything else you want to add to the podcast thing, or any of the names I've said, or should we shut this show down?
And for Conrad Thompson, they said he has too many commercials, and he makes it all about himself.
Mm-hmm.
See, the first time I watched a Jeff Jarrett My World podcast, and I was getting hot at Conrad because he was interrupting Jeff every time he tried to give an answer. He wanted to make sure that people, I guess, knew that he knew what he was talking about, and he did. But I think where Jeff was the protagonist, he was the baby face, and it's almost like Conrad was the heel. And like I just said it, that I think Jeff got just a little teed off at him there for a little bit. Didn't stop the podcast, but I mean, they kept going. But I think Conrad actually took away, if you were enjoying Jeff, listening to him, and then in comes Conrad to give him a different train of thought on a negative note, then I don't think that's where I kind of said, well, my train of thought is broken now, so I don't care about it. So I turned it off.
Right. So the last clip I watched of Jeff Jarrett's My World podcast, because I actually do watch a bit here and there with Jeff. The only one I've listened all the way through is when you were the subject, and we ended up doing a show basically rebutting it. But on the clips, I think the last one I saw was about 6 minutes long, and I swear down that Conrad spoke for more than 3 minutes before Jeff said one word. And it's just
really?
I promise you, Conrad spoke more than Jeff did. And it's just like, cut the question down. It's just rabbiting on for no reason. It's like, so it's one of those things where I also learn from this. And apart from, and I'm going to be talking now and I'm going to be complaining about co-hosts talking, which I understand the irony of it. But with these podcasts, with the whole podcast thing, yes, I understand I've got to talk a lot because I'm reading out lists and then you react. But when it's just a simple question, I try and boil it down to about as small as it gets. If it doesn't include a quote, and then just get out of the way for the most part. The only thing that I do that bugs me is when I miss time jumping in for a sentence, which I do on occasion with you, is because we've got like half a second difference in like reaction time because we're doing this over Zoom, or like 3/4 of a second. So sometimes it can get a little hard to time when I know that you've stopped talking and then I try and jump in. But other than that, I think we've got a good flow.
Oh, we do. And if we're really not factual, don't worry about, there's my deal again. Hey, but I have stayed probably pretty still for the majority of the podcast. Yes?
Well, you were doing this leaning thing at one point as well, so it was making you look more quizzical as well.
Oh, yeah.
More analytical.
It's the thinker pose.
Yeah, not Rodan. I can't. Who did the statue? Rodan's thinker? I can't remember. Now we're almost veering into like classic art now, so we're best at that point. We're going to stop. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching and listening, and however you're consuming this media. We will be back on Tuesday to answer your questions. If you want your question answered, you email to questionsfordutch@gmail.com. But for now, thank you very much, Dutch, and we the people.
Well, let me say one thing. I appreciate everybody that wrote to us or wrote to James, because it's really a good, I'm humbled by it. I'm humbled that 430 people took time out of their day to write us and tell us that they enjoy the podcast. I enjoy it too. I enjoy talking wrestling. James enjoys it. So we hope that comes through on the podcast. And if you need anything, like you say, write James. Where do they write you at? On the page?
For questions for Dutch, it is questionsfordutch@gmail.com.
Well, I say, and if anybody wants to write to me, then I'll write you back. Dirty Dutch Mantell with 2 L's at gmail.com, and I'll get right back to you because I have nothing else to do. So
Fair enough.
We'll see you next week. We the people.